Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to this fireside chat, Beyond Hyperscale, building the digital foundation for the AI era. My name is Marcus Khan. I'm the Managing Director for Cundall Singapore, a design and engineering consultant. Please join me in welcoming our two guest speakers today, Simon Vaughan from Stack and Dean Coetzee from EPI.
Thanks, Marcus. And valiant effort with our surnames there. I think that's the biggest challenge of today, kind of out of the way. My name's Simon Vaughan, and I'm Managing Director for Stack here in Malaysia. Been in Malaysia for 15 years, so it's a real pleasure to be here speaking in front of you guys. A little bit about Stack before we go and speak to Dean. Stack are a global hyperscale data center investor, builder, and operator, operating out of the US, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. I'll give you a bit more detail on that as we go through the conversation. I'll pass over to Dean.
It's great to join you guys today, and thank you to everyone that's here too. A little bit about EPI. Company's been around for about 40 years. It focuses predominantly on data center training, but also audits and certification, so design and construction, validations, operations assessments, ISO assessments. So my view comes from the perspective of someone who's heading up a company which really focuses predominantly around design and construction and the training and the people required for it. It means we tend to see what's happening in the industry sometimes a year or two in advance. We can see what's coming down the pipeline, and we also get to work with a lot of large organizations and see what they're doing in different markets. We are global, so again, the perspective is one where it's coming from a completely worldwide perspective, although our HQ and I'm also based in Asia, so very familiar with the local market too.
Thank you, Simon and Dean. So our chat today will cover a variety of themes: location, power, partnerships, and many more. And we'll try to ground our conversations in a Malaysian context. Obviously, I'm pretty sure whatever that our guest speakers are going to be talking today are going to be very relevant in the region as well. Malaysia, as I think we all know, it's on track to become Asia's third largest data center market, just behind Japan and India. And I guess the growth has been spurred by factors such as, a strategic location, favorable government policies, competitive costs for water, power, and land. And also because of the growth and demand, the strong demand for AI and cloud computing. So much excitement, so much is happening, so much questions, so much uncertainty. So I hope that some of our conversations today might be able to answer some of those questions, perhaps spark new ideas, or even uncover bold new perspective to where the new breakthrough might come from. As well as, I think one of the important things that we all should know is that obviously this data center industry does not work alone. So what do we need to collaborate across industries to basically get there? So let's get started. Simon, this first question is for you. So in my research and through conversations with industry peers, I came across two critical selling points of Stack infrastructure: speed and scale. Be ready as quickly as possible, from advanced purchase of powered land, utility integration, local implementation, accelerated permits, and from a scale perspective, the ability to deploy multiple configurations across multiple levels, whether it's a campus or a single tenant, multiple tenant. And obviously, people now know that you are building a 220 megawatt data center in Johor. So, on that basis, what are the strategies that you have come across from a speed and scale in this massive development?
Thanks for the question, Marcus, and thanks for the reminder. The newspapers kind of picked up quite a lot about the size and scale of our data center down in Johor, which is it's a huge entry into Malaysia as a market for Stack APAC. Strategically, the way we as an operator kind of work in entering a market, and part of the things you talk about in terms of speed and scale, there are, I guess, two sets of factors that influence our decision making. Currently in Asia Pacific, we operate in Australia, Japan. We've acquired some land in Korea, and Malaysia is the third cab off the rank in terms of design and development of a data center. So decisions in working out which geography to go into or where to expand within an existing geography, number of factors. Ease of doing business, right up at the top. And you might ask, well, what does that mean, Simon? What does ease of doing business mean? Ethical landscape, good rule of law, clear and transparent legal process, clear contractual arrangements, whether that be with utility providers, contractors, general suppliers, all are super important. The maturity of the market also matters. you kind of never really want to go and put your money in an unproven environment. Some people do. Maybe the huge superstars of the globe right now have got that much cash to play with, they can do it. But where you've got we're owned by private equity, so we've got to get return on investment. So controlling and making sure that return on investment is achieved is important to us. The final kind of point in terms of the strategy is looking at the environment in which you're going to operate. And the key point in there is talent. Dean, myself, we'll have all been to forums like this where talent kind of is hugely important when looked at. Malaysia is absolutely no different. So in terms of the strategy, those would be the kind of 5 or 6 points we would look at. In tandem with that, tactically, then once you get through that, you begin to navigate those waypoints. You then look at tactics. So from a design and construction perspective, off-site construction, modularization, precast, prefab, all of those things we are implementing down in Johor. And Stack are no different than a lot of our colleagues in the industry in that regard. Allied to that, our designs are kind of pretty consistent globally in terms of IT, BMS security. The backbones are consistent, so we can deploy those consistent solutions frequently, which then allows us to speed up commissioning times quite significantly. That helps us, once we're kind of moving towards site, which is the point in time where we are just now.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that leads us quite nicely to, when you talk about talent there. So, Dean, this is for you. EPI is the leading global certification and training body for data centers, right? And you cover design, operations, governance, and so much more under your IT and data center training framework. So what have been the biggest challenges that you have been facing to develop, to update, to align yourself with this AI revolution? Do you see a trend there? Do you see, what can you share with the audience over here with regards to that?
I think to provide some context, almost as a foundation, a lot of the training we provide is based on best practice standards. And the certifications we provide are also based on certifications and audits against those best practices. So it could be the TI 942 standard, it could be EN 5600, ISO standards, and so forth, and how we apply those various standards to our data center. The big thing at the moment is that we've effectively outstripped the labor pool. And it's not something unique to Malaysia. This is a global issue. Doesn't matter if it's California or Manila. There's just a shortage of people everywhere. You find that more mature markets tend to have a lot more experienced skills. So countries like Japan and Australia are actually suffering less than emerging markets, particularly countries in Southeast Asia. So we tend to focus on providing best practices, skills-based training, rather than teaching an engineer how to be an engineer. We teach an engineer why we build a data center a certain way. What's proving to be challenging lately is that there are some really rapid changes in the design approach that a lot of the larger operators are moving towards. A lot of it driven by high power density in racks. That means we're looking at new mechanical solutions, predominantly liquid-based cooling solutions. And there are no best practice standards for that just yet. What tends to happen with best practice standards is it's effectively committees that go through a peer review process and they update the standard. And the standards are based on what we've seen work in the industry. But a lot of the deployments we're seeing right now are prototypical in many cases, which means that it's proving more and more challenging to train people up and upskill them. One of the bigger issues too is that if you think about how the industry's changed in the last 10 years, I was talking to Simon about this earlier, 10 years ago a 10 megawatt data center was a monstrosity. Now it's not even a phase one of a project. So you've got people who are coming into the industry, they've never worked in the industry, and the first project they get thrown into is a hyperscale project that's a 50 megawatt build with completely new mechanical systems and massive amounts of power going into the site itself. So the advice we're providing to most of our clients is to try and adhere to those best practice standards as best you can. While things are changing a lot, they're not deviating a massive amount either. And what you will find is that for the most part, 90% of the way we've constructed these sites has pretty much stayed the same over 10 years. They're incremental changes. What you need to then do is try and make sure that you're keeping your people up to date and also upskilling new people that we're bringing in, because that's also the issue at the moment. Everyone's poaching from everyone else, and it's caused a huge issue in the industry. What's really required is an investment in new people that are coming in, not just graduates, but people who've got relevant skills, electricians, people with HVAC backgrounds and so forth. Bring them in, upskill them, start putting them into these projects and sites.
But staying on topic there, I mean, we talked a lot about the technical side of things. What do you see from the non-technical side of things that is actually really critical in somebody to actually succeed in this industry?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it. There's the individual's perspective who's looking to make a career for themselves in the industry. I don't think there's a better industry to probably try and make an entry into than this at the moment. I think, there's obviously concerns over what AI could mean for the labor force in general over the next 10 years. I think most of us that are in this industry right now are going to be relatively well insulated and benefit from it, right? So it's quite attractive. CEO of NVIDIA a few weeks ago was saying we don't need more IT people, we need more plumbers and electricians. So if you've got kids, if you've got people close to you that are looking for a career, honestly, it's probably one of the best things you can do. Look for the typical STEM degrees and professions, look for those trades, and look at this industry overall. I think from a commercial perspective, though, particularly from an employer's perspective, retention is crucial. You're investing so much in bringing people in. You're often spending a lot to attract them in the first place. Talent is precious. You need to invest in them long term and show some path in their personal development long term too. And we do see that. I mean, particularly from EPI's perspective at the moment, what we're seeing is a lot of engagement from the industry when it comes to investing in graduate programs and so forth. In fact, Stack's one of them. We've been doing a bit of work with them in Italy at the moment where a lot of graduates are coming in with trades behind them. They're upskilling them, they're training them, they're offering them apprenticeships and so forth. And this is what's needed. Malaysia's actually been very good with that. There's been a lot of investment and a huge push towards graduate programs. And I think it's good for Malaysia long term that that's being done. We see far more activity in Malaysia than we do in some of the other regions. And I think Malaysia ends up becoming more competitive because of it long term.
I can't agree more. I guess with regards to retention, I think there's so much movement in this industry right now that, you really do want to keep the best talent with you. And I think that's a big push there. Coming back to you, Simon. I mean, we talked about, location and market strategy. When you think of Malaysia as an emerging hub, and you've shared with the audience, the strategy around speed and scale. I mean, what is the thing that you should be avoiding, beyond, say, power and regulations that might actually break or make a data center investment?
Yeah, thanks. There's a third element to speed and scale, and that element's certainty. So Malaysia's a great environment, and I say that because I've been a guest of Malaysia for 15 years or so, but it's true. It has got so many good things going for it. And one of those things is that certainty, where you're investing significant amounts of money into a new geography, as we have done. A lot of care has to be taken around that. Beyond power availability, beyond legislation, all of which are not easily, but navigable in Malaysia with the right approach. The kind of key to it all, and picking a bit what Dean was saying there, we just had a conversation about retaining resources. Slightly different story here. Biggest challenge for Stack and for any data center player in the market is talent. And kind of the pleasing things to see, certainly for our facilities in Johor, there's been a lot of positive steps taken. The Johor Talent Development Council put together. We're working very closely with those guys. I met Dean about 45 minutes ago and found out he's training some of our people in EMEA. So there's a lot more to do with regards to that. Really enabling youngsters in Malaysia and perspective around Johor Bahru and broader Johor to have an opportunity to get into the data center industry, which I agree we are privileged to be part of at such an exciting time. You cannot open a newspaper without reading about what's going off in the US. Elon Musk sending things to space. What's he doing next? Meta 5 gigawatt development. These are huge developments globally and super exciting. I guess our job becomes being open to not just giving the opportunity, but training people effectively and guiding them into roles in the industry that the industry needs. And it could be people who've graduated and have come from a technical plumbing, HVAC, electrical background, tweaking that knowledge to be able to work in a data center environment, which, in Malaysia, it's hot. Working on a building site maybe isn't the thing everyone wants to do. In fact, it's probably the thing that nobody wants to do. But working in an air-conditioned environment, yes, there's pressure involved, but working in a new environment, earning a salary that probably wasn't achievable 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is something that I'm really excited about. And working with JTDC and a lot of the other Malaysian organizations to give a platform for people to get into, to learn about data centers, to become data center employees, is something that really is exciting to us.
Thank you for that. I mean, to you, Dean, then, do you agree with that? I mean, what other pitfalls do you see from a talent development perspective?
I think there's two ways to look at it. I think at the end of the day, the environment that exists within certain markets ultimately dictates what opportunity exists too. Skills are one element of that. I think that Malaysia and a lot of the operators that are active here are actually taking it quite seriously and investing in skills development, which is fantastic to see. We train a hell of a lot of people out here, which is a good sign that, you know, people are investing in their people long term and they realize they need talent. I think the other thing, though, is that when you look at Malaysia from a competitive perspective in the region as a whole, there's things that obviously have a huge impact on the operators. And the market's maturing quite a lot, and that the operators are starting to specialize. You've got companies like Stack, for example, that tend to focus on hyperscale requirements. You've got, you know, others in the region that are looking more at the enterprise market. You still do, though, have a lot of investment by government, for example, where they're investing in their own facilities instead of co-locating. So what's important is for regulators to decide if this is an industry they really want to nurture. And if they do, they've got to support it, not just through skills programs, but through better support with utilities and more certainty around utilities too. So that means everything from, you know, making sure that the power is actually going to be available, that there's stability in the cost of that power, there's stability in the amount of talent that they're bringing through, local universities and technical colleges and vocational colleges and so forth. So it's a multifaceted approach. I think Malaysia's getting a lot right. That's why you're actually seeing the explosion in investment that you are. And proximity has also helped a lot. Singapore saying no more was the best thing that happened to Malaysia, right? But they saw the potential there. I met with a chap from MDEC a little earlier, and I still recall having a conversation with him 10 years ago where they were saying to people, Johor should be a place where you consider building a data center. They were investing in power infrastructure back then. You look at that investment, how it's paid off now, it showed that looking forward really paid off. I think that's something that needs to continue, and they need to continue to probably look a little long term and decide, okay, well, look, if we really want to make JB or KL or Malaysia the data center hub for the region, we've got to continue to support the industry as best we can. So it's not just skills, it's about utilities and creating the right environment that's attractive to big capital that wants to come in.
I guess that's what people call the foresight, right? Not necessarily crystal balling, but essentially having a vision and then basically working towards that. I mean, talking about data centers, obviously we need to talk about technology and innovation. As AI workloads are pushing, you know, power densities that are never seen before. Simon, this is for you. You know, from Stack's perspective, do you think that infrastructure, as far as technology innovation, can keep up with how the technology is progressing at such a normal pace? In terms of, you know, we talked about liquid cooling, 2 years ago. That was something that we probably wouldn't even consider, but today it becomes ubiquitous in any data center that you have to basically implement liquid cooling, or microgrids, or essentially some of the direct current infrastructure that people are talking about now. So, do we need to rethink the way we plan and design data centers moving forward?
The short answer is yes, of course. Density, how much bang for your buck can you get, all critical factors. You mentioned liquid cooling 2-ish years ago, not a consideration. Now, absolutely a consideration with regards to data halls that are hosting AI or ML workloads. Cloud computing, slightly different maybe. So having a series of solutions to suit what's happening out. I mean, there's a lot of work with the Malaysian government bringing Malaysia into an AI hub. It isn't quite there yet, but there's a desire for that to be the case. Down in Johor, Stack, our first entry into the market is air-cooled. Now, you got to look at the climate you're in, the availability of resources, the sensitivity around that, not just power, water. So we kind of look at things holistically as possible, but with, in the back of our minds, our clients in mind also. So strategies around renewable energy, strategies around usage of treated water, all super important. And I think the guys who've got the money, the chip guys, right? Those guys are driving things. So those guys are driving a lot of the solutions that they're super smart. They can make the chip. They can cool that chip. That then goes out in the market and becomes the next cooling solution. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the industry. Scale, speed, density. Will that mean things go smaller? I mentioned Meta's development just a few moments ago. In the US, there are 4 to 5 gigawatt developments. These are in huge developments. I think 5 gigawatts, about 20% of Johor local power station production in one kind of data center campus. And along with that becomes workforce. You need a town to support them. You need to feed them. You need medical facilities. You need education facilities. You're almost building towns around all of this. So, yep. From a design perspective, and you guys over at Cundall are well positioned for this, I'm sure, there has to be equal amount of effort and input in solutioning the data center developments so that we are maintaining that sensitivity around natural resources.
Thank you. And I think, Dean, this leads nicely to our earlier conversations or discussion about adaptation to your training program. There's so much new technology happening in the future, which today's education will not be able to cope with it. Or rather, today's education is not necessarily looking at how things might progress in the next 5 years. So from EPI's perspective, how would you prepare your trainees to be ready for the future technology?
It's a big challenge. It's a really big challenge because we also can't predict which way the future will, really evolve. If you look at it at the moment, we're not even 100% sure which kind of cooling solutions will actually settle and become the default. We've seen a lot of, particularly our clients, who've been looking at a certified approach for immersive cooling solutions. You've got on-chip cooling at the moment. And we feel really sorry for the operators in particular because they're getting beaten up constantly over this stuff. There's no certainty in 15 years' time what these data centers are going to look like, but they're having to raise capital and build out forward-based projections over 15, 20 years. So really challenging. I guess the best way to future-proof yourself at the moment, we'll talk about talent in a second, from a commercial perspective, is to try and make sure you're bulletproof, particularly around core and shell. That gives you a lot of flexibility. Floor loads are obviously changing. There might be a requirement to increase the amount of even cable and whatnot that you're running within your facilities themselves. Those are the sorts of measures that could be taken. The other is financial. Looking at how you're actually contracting with your clients, what their expectations are, how realistic it is to take on certain types of customers. Everyone wants those big badges, but sometimes a particular customer or their type of build might not suit the type of facility that you're constructing to, and you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. Lastly, with regards to training your people, again, look, we always advocate for a best practice approach because a best practice approach is generally going to be what keeps you out of trouble. If you're aligning yourself with what people in the industry are recommending is the best way to design, construct, and operate a data center, you're going to be okay for 85-90% of it. The rest then comes down to how well managed you are internally and how far you've deviated away from those best practice standards. At the same time too, and I do say it, a lot of the operators are getting beaten up, particularly by the hyperscalers who can kind of demand things from those operators who are all chasing those big badges. It's difficult to say walk away from multi-million-dollar contracts, but sometimes it's something you got to look at and realize, should we be taking this on or shouldn't we be taking this on? Where does this actually fit within our development plan? Because I think talent is one thing, but attracting talent into the right type of operating environment is crucial too. Hyperscale requirements are very different to enterprise. And you're already starting to see a huge split in the industry where people at the operators are realizing that, those with extensive enterprise backgrounds might not necessarily be well suited to hyperscale environments. So a lot of it comes down to the recruitment side of things too. From a training perspective, look, the training is always going to follow best practice standards. So if the standards are always 2 or 3 years behind, that lags into the training. At the same time, you can't rely on the vendors for training because they're always going to want to push product too much. So it's a bit of a balancing act and one that there isn't a clear answer on. So much of it's obviously going to have to be managed by the organizations. And guys like Simon who've got all sorts of challenges trying to find people, get the right people, retain the right people, and make sure they're the kind of people that can design and operate the kind of facilities that Stack, for example, would be building, right?
Can't agree more with that. I guess, just a bit conscious of time, I guess this is the last question for both of you, really. Value chain collaboration. Panel discussions like this typically end with a call for action. How are we going to be strengthening partnerships and how we can actually move towards the same vision, same goal in the future. But we haven't necessarily seen a big momentum or big traction in that matter. And we kind of want to ask both of you in terms of what's the missing ingredient? What's been missing in all this? Because of all the hype, why isn't this gaining enough momentum that propels us collaboratively across this industry towards that same vision? What are the boldest or most unconventional partnership models that you can actually see that we should be considering but have not actually considered in this industry? Simon, maybe you start with you.
Yeah, I can do my best to try and take that away. That's a very tricky question. So there's loads of really good things going on in Malaysia with regards to how Malaysia is, maybe 5 years ago, data centers in Malaysia just hosted, banking, basic stuff. All of a sudden, Malaysia becomes the epicenter of Asia-Pacific data center construction. Malaysia's catching up, or has done really well to catch up quickly and try and set some rules. So we hear about Plan Malaysia, we hear about the Data Center Task Force, we hear about kind of the best practices within the local majlis in terms of development. The general public in Malaysia, kind of like anywhere else in the world, don't necessarily want a data center in their backyard. Now, Malaysia's got plenty of opportunity, plenty of brownfield space to build on, plenty of industrial land. So zoning becomes important, land zoning, the way the local authorities operate with developers is important. You've then got in Malaysia the development operator side in terms of the Malaysia Data Center Association, the Asia Pacific Data Center Association, so that pulling everybody together to pull in the same direction is the, in my opinion, number one requirement that needs to be pushed hard by everybody in the industry. And it's pleasing to see the Data Center Task Force and the chairman of that really putting some energy into making that a reality.
Thank you, Simon. Dean?
I think just to expand on that a little bit, I see it as three key elements. The one's capital markets, the other's the operators, and then the last is the regulators. I think there's a huge disconnect sometimes with capital markets and the operators where they don't quite understand the data center industry to the degree that they should, and it makes it incredibly difficult for a lot of the operators, and this is a global problem, to secure the capital they need to construct the facilities that they want to. And then on the other side, you've got regulators who are not 100% sure half the time whether or not they want the data center industry in their backyard. And if they do, they need to probably be taking concrete steps and making decisions to support the industry, and that means get behind it by making access to utilities something that they're focusing on. So I think that's really where things need to be looked at a little bit more. I think we probably need to stop beating up the operators as much. They're always getting hammered over things like how efficiently they're running and all the rest of it. These guys have every commercial incentive in the world to run the most efficient data centers in the world. But so much of it is reliant on the money to build them and the local infrastructure to run them with, right? So that's where we probably need to focus a little bit more attention to.
Thank you so much for that. So I guess that's the end of our fireside chat. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Dean, for such an insightful discussion over there.